Welcome back to the show. Did you know that the architect who designed the World Trade Center in New York is from Seattle? Minoru Yamasaki's designs and influence can be seen throughout the Emerald City and across the country. Seattle University professor Paul Kidder explores these connections in his book, Minoru Yamasaki and the Fragility of Architecture.
Yamasaki built many buildings in the United States and throughout the world, and I visited over 50 of them in this project. And what I found was that people who use the buildings tend to like them and even call them iconic buildings. Mm-hmm. But critics and architects can be very critical of Yamasaki. So I'm trying to stress that he's important as an architect and also in American history. And I'm trying to dig into what his architectural vision was to try to communicate that.
Well, I mean, he has a very important part of history in architecture. Talk about his work on the World Trade Center.
The World Trade Center has some important connections to Seattle buildings, actually. So Yamasaki did the Pacific Science Center. And that science center has a wonderful feel to it. The plaza, you go out there and it's got this wonderful calm to it, but it's also a very lively visual space. And one of the people working on the World Trade Center project visited the 62 World's Fair here, just enchanted with that building. And he thought, well, we're going to build this enormous building back in New York. Maybe this architect could soften it, right? And make it more human and bring all of this elegance to this overwhelming project. And that's what Yamasaki tried to do. Ironically enough, he saw the World Trade Center as a symbol of peace. He wanted to bring some of the qualities of his other buildings, which are focused on feelings of serenity and calm, spirituality and openness. Of course, there's a lot of controversy about how successful he was. He wanted the building to be, as he called it, quiet and not be too busy and so forth because it was so big. But a lot of people saw that as, well, they're dull and they don't communicate much. There were successes and failures in that regard.
Well, criticism or not, I mean, you just blew my mind when you tell me that he designed the Pacific Science Center. I stood there with hundreds of others watching the solar eclipse in silence, and it was the perfect location to experience something like that.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. Tell me about more of his buildings in Seattle.
Well, there are 3 buildings, and that's the Science Center and the Rainier Tower, the one that sits up on the pedestal, and the IBM Building, which is kitty corner to that. They all have qualities that are connected to the World Trade Center. For example, that quietness that he went for is there in the Rainier Tower. You know, it's dramatic at the bottom, but above that, it's a very formal, quiet kind of building. Then the IBM Building has some of the same structural engineering that the World Trade Center has. It has those pinstripe columns on the outside. And those columns, it's kind of innovative that they actually help hold the building up. That was true of the World Trade Center. It was the exterior of the building that provided a lot of the structural support to it. So those 3 buildings are all very characteristic of Yamasaki, but his roots in Seattle go much deeper. He was born here. He learned architecture at the University of Washington, and his training there really shaped his vision. And he influenced architecture at the University of Washington because he was on the architectural commission and everybody had to build in ways that made him happy. And so he had an influence on
Paul, it's not often that we're driving around town and we look up at these high rises and think that there's much architecture involved. I mean, you just see these massive towers. But hearing this, knowing this is such a great education. What do you hope people who are non-architects take away from your book?
I think that we all feel that architecture, good architecture, is not just useful, and it's not just good looking necessarily, it's meaningful. And when we all get on airplanes to go look at the great buildings in Europe and so forth, when we travel, that's when we really look at architecture, right?
Right.
And the reason we go to see buildings is because they're culturally meaningful. And I think some of Yamasaki's buildings have that quality. They're meaningful buildings. And that's what I tried to emphasize when I describe them and explore them.
Isn't that fascinating?